which was also handed to me a couple of days ago, delivered from the lead mission planner of Sandy 1. Sandy 1 were the A-10s that were a part of the daylight rescue mission of 44 Alpha, Dude 44 Alpha out of Iran. And if you know anything about Sandys, their job is to bring those A-10s and put them in between the enemy and that down pilot. And so their job is to literally sacrifice themselves for someone else. And in Iran, in contested territory, that's exactly what they did. They call it CSAR 2517, which I think is meant to reflect Ezekiel 25:17.
Well, there's this passage I got memorized. Sort of fits this occasion. Ezekiel 25:17.
The path of the downed aviator.
The path of the righteous man
is beset on all sides.
And is beset on all sides.
By the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men.
It's by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men.
And I will strike down upon thee with...
And I will strike down upon thee with
great vengeance and furious anger.
Great vengeance and furious anger.
Those who attempt to capture and destroy my brother.
Those who attempt to poison and destroy my brother.
And you will know my call sign.
And you will know my name
is Sandy 1.
Is the Lord.
When I lay my vengeance.
When I lay my vengeance upon thee.
Hello, Bobby Jones here for MeidasTouch and Valor Media Networks. The clip you just saw is the person who's responsible for executing President Trump's naval blockade. That would be the Secretary of Defense, or as he likes to call himself, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. Now, if you think a person that quotes a made-up Bible verse understands the complexities of what he's implementing right now in the Persian Gulf, you're absolutely 100% incorrect. I'm going to go over 5 things that this blockade is actually doing, and then we'll talk a little bit about how everything else surrounding the blockade is utter chaos. So let's start with fact number 1. Number 1, a naval blockade has very serious connotations. Words matter when you're dealing with warfare and the legality of it. A blockade is an act of war. There have been many retired admirals who have stated this. There's the law of naval warfare that is strictly against this. Legal scholars and historians who have studied this practice, ever since man basically went to war on ships, are saying this is completely wrong. And Trump imposed this blockade without any authorization, not one from Congress, not one from the United Nations, not one from NATO. No authorizing figures have stepped up to say this is wrong. Number 2, this is going to continuously lead to unsustained ceasefires. So the ceasefire that's supposedly going on right now between the United States and Iran is not a ceasefire. There have been multiple exchanges of different variances of ammunition that have happened during this. And then, of course, that's not even talking about what's going on with Israel and Lebanon. Although they're supposedly in a ceasefire, we'll see how well that goes and how long that lasts. But the bottom line is a blockade is basically shredding a ceasefire because it's still an act of war. So how do you expect to negotiate during a time period where this, quote, ceasefire is going on when the very notion of a blockade is aggressive and in many ways offensive and not defensive? And because of that, step 3 of this, you have the global economic shock, the oil shock that is coming. The longer this blockade of a freaking blockade continues, the world will be strangled for oil. Many countries in Asia in particular, to include South Korea, Japan, and China even to a degree, are suffering from oil shortages already. People are rationing. You can't go get gas like you want to. You're not taking hot showers like you want to. All of these things that people take for granted, which come because of oil in steady supply from specifically the Middle East and Iran to the rest of the world that does not have access to those resources. The United States has not felt the shock as hard yet because the United States has a certain level of energy independence. However, these are connected markets, and the longer ships are forced to stay in port or cannot go in port, specifically on the Iranian coast, the worse this is going to get. Now, granted, Iran knows this, and they understand that this is their ultimate bargaining chip. President Trump goes from panicking about the economy and saying he's going to blow everybody up into the Stone Age to being relatively chill about the economy, saying, hey, a deal is always 2 days away. Seems to be a reoccurring thing. But as he's saying a deal is just a couple of days away, et cetera, we're dealing with the economic and diplomatic isolation of two major oil producing nations in the United States and Iran. Now, the United States is being isolated by the rest of the world because the world is rightfully ticked off at the United States. Donald Trump does not seem to care because now he doesn't want to be in this war, and it's an annoyance. However, we're seeing a power dynamic shift economically where countries that never would think of going to China are now working out bilateral deals to work with them. You also have them working with Iran themselves to try to figure out a way, once the strait opens back up, to ensure their oil supply. No one is checking in with the United States. Nobody. So you have these ships that are trying to hold a blockade. And mind you, the spacing of these ships are pretty immense due to the fact that they're trying to stand off away from Iranian weapons while also trying to catch massive oil tankers at the same time, both coming and going. It's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to do covering that kind of surface area with 12 or more ships. You need a heck of a lot more ships to have a continuous on-station time where there are no real gaps, but we'll see what happens. The bottom line is this. You order a blockade, you do something illegal. There are legal ramifications to include economic ramifications that you are not prepared for, and there is no off-ramp from the blockade. When you blockade a blockade, you're basically saying we're not serious about diplomatic relations because there's no relieving of the pressure. And that should scare everybody. It's not the fact that Trump is doing this. It's not the fact that Iran is being intransigent in their stance. No one has an off-ramp because the escalation ladder keeps adding new rings to it. Now, if you are someone who is sitting somewhere stateside in the United States and you don't think it's that big a deal, it is. You're going to feel the pressure at the pump. But more importantly, your servicemen and women, specifically those of the naval service, that includes the Navy and the Marine Corps, they're struggling. The USS Gerald R. Ford just set the modern day record for a deployment for an aircraft carrier, so surpassing 296 days at sea. That's a lot. And mind you, they had to deal with a fire that lasted 30 hours. They've had to deal with the coming and going back into the strait, out of the strait, this, that, and the other, not knowing when they're going to come home. And for those of us who have deployed, you know how mentally wearing it can be when there's no end date in sight. Mind you, all of this is happening under the belief and the scope that the United States is winning. No, correction. I'm sorry. The United States has won the war in Iran, and we're just waiting for Iran to come back to the negotiation table. All of this is basically shown in this blockade. Chaos that is neither organized nor strategic. And at the end of the day, President Trump has to make a decision. Is he willing to lose face to try to get some semblance of return to normalcy, or does he double and triple down on military action, thinking an enemy that has yet to surrender will somehow magically surrender because of it? Here's the thing. If you look at the movement of forces, the amount of weapons, the amount of people in the Middle East right now, something tells me Donald Trump does not plan on losing face. Something tells me he's preparing to do something more dramatic than any of us could have foreseen just 2 months ago.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.